Welcome back to this once-in-a-lifetime trip to the Galápagos Islands. Today we go north of the equator to Genovesa, the northeastern part of the Galápagos archipelago. This island is sometimes called Bird Island because of its large and varied colonies of birds. Our 15th video opens with a galaxy anchoring inside the remnants of an ancient shield volcano. Multiple lava flows created a low, flat caldera that collapsed on one side, allowing seawater to flood in and form Darwin Bay, which is surrounded by the horseshoe-shaped Genovesa Island. The collapsed side of the rim served as our passageway through which we entered. The submerged crater is now encircled by steep cliffs that are home to many seabirds. We went to the upper deck, had coffee and tea, and watched the sunrise. The Pangos then took the science team to Prince Philip Steps, where we climbed up the side of the caldera walls to the rim, about 47 steps from the ocean.
It's really different than the rest of the Galapagos. It's not so high. It's not like the typical island that we have around the south with volcanoes on, you know. This is a mix between uplift and a volcano here, this area. What we have around here are those red-footed boobies. So the first ones for us. See, that one's trying to build in the nest. So it's bringing a little stick, you know, branches. Just stayed over there. It's a little different courtship than the blue-footed booby. So and it's just they nest on the trees. They have very short legs, and actually around here they are close to the deep area. So where we have the pelagics hunting. So this is why around here we have a lot of red-footed boobies. So you hear that, but it's about they're mating now. If you see that, just we arrive in the right time. They are mating. This is a little different courtship than the other birds. You know, they nest on the trees, and actually this is kind of a little difficult. So it's not dancing like a blue-footed boobies. Just stay around there. See that? It's going to fit in the baby. Look at that, it's fitting the baby. You see that? It's fitting the two babies. Those two are immatures, you know, or babies. So Father come in and make the sounds, typical sounds that they have when they are hungry. So you saw that? It's just coming to fit in the babies, and then it's going to fly away because they're very hungry. They're big. It's kind of adult, but they are babies, you know, immatures. Two of them.
So what are these birds over here? I've seen tons of them all over this island, and they're kind of like black and white. Can you tell me more about them?
Well, those are Nazca Boobies. They are the largest of the booby family. They are about 35 inches and have a wingspan of 5 feet. They have a white body, black wings and tail. They have a long pointed bill and a black mask around their eyes and bill. They also have large gray webbed feet. These birds are similar to the blue-footed booby because they dive as well. They dive into the water to catch flying fish and squid. and they can dive from distances of over 90 feet.
Wow.
They nest in shallow depressions on tropical islands, usually along the cliffs, so this way they can dive into their deeper waters. The female lays 1 to 2 eggs, and both parents help incubate the eggs. The egg hatches over 43 days. If they have 2 eggs, the first egg will usually hatch 9 days earlier. And when the second baby hatches, the oldest, which is the stronger one, will push the baby out of the nest, push the younger sibling out of the nest, so it will die. This will ensure the older sibling's survival. The second baby is basically an insurance.
Right now we're looking at a specimen of a Nazca Booby here, currently sitting on its nest, and underneath you can see both 1 egg and 1-day-old hatchling. What's going to happen here is what we call siblicide. That hatchling is going to actually push the other egg out of the nest, or the other chick when it hatches out of the nest, and the parents will then ignore it and will only feed the older chick. This process is to ensure that the older chick will survive because there's just not enough food for both the chicks. We've mentioned siblicide several times when we've been talking about the Nazca Boobies here on the Galapagos, and this seems to be a product of that process where the older sibling will push the younger sibling out of the nest to die.
Okay, so we've heard about the blue-footed boobies, and then we've heard about the Nazca boobies. Can you tell me anything about the red-footed boobies?
Well, the red-footed boobies are smaller than the other boobies. They are the smallest of them all. They are 28 inches and have a wingspan of 3.3 feet long. They live about 20 years. Their weight is 30 to 39 ounces, so they're kind of like the size of a chicken. And their bill is long and pale blue, and they have red feet, which is how they get their name. Oh my goodness. They have lean aerodynamic bodies, so that way it helps them when they dive. So they dive in much deeper areas, like with the sharks and everything. They have closable nostrils, so the water won't get in their nose. And they have very long wings that wrap around their body before they enter the water. They have very sharp eyesight, so this way they can see the fish. And the chicks are all brown or blackish gray with a black bill and face. They don't mature for about maybe 2 or 3 years.
This is the nesting ground for the Nazca Booby as well as the red-footed booby, but we're looking at a mechanism that this booby has for cooling off when it's hot. You can see its throat quivering, and it's a cooling mechanism apparently. And this is a female sitting on an egg, and I just watched her turning and repositioning herself and the egg. So it's kind of exciting to see this happening. And as we've heard, only one of the 2 eggs that will be laid will survive, because the older one will in fact kill the second sibling just to make sure that it survives because of food. We're on top of a cliff in a caldera, which is also appropriate for these birds because they are very heavy birds, and that's how they fly. They're able to just launch themselves off the cliffs to fly. When they walk, they look quite ungainly, very much the waddling motion. Thank you for lifting yourself up so we could see your egg. That was very kind of you. And that sound in the background is a pair of red-footed boobies securing a place for their nest and probably getting ready to mate and build a nest. Well, we just walked around the corner from where we saw the mama sitting on its egg, and here is a very proud mama with a hatched baby that's 1 month old, just a little ball of fluff. And since we are not seeing the second one, I guess it already took care of killing its sibling. just across the road from where we saw the 1-month-old, we're fortunate enough to come across a 3-month-old chick. Certainly growing fast, and it's stretching its little wings for us. It's posing. I'm sure it's waiting for its mama to come back with some food from the ocean. This is one of my favorite trees, and the top of this caldera is just covered in these trees. They're not very big. We've seen much taller ones on other islands, but this is called a Sandelwood, and I think it's one of my favorite because it just looks like it's dead. All the leaves have fallen off. The reason for that is it's entering the dry season, and the leaves would just carry out transpiration and exhaust the water supply very quickly for the tree. And so I had to ask myself, well, how does it survive? It's got nothing with which to carry out photosynthesis. And what we discovered was if you just scratch off the top layer of lichen and bark underneath, you've got a perfectly green layer where the chlorophyll resides and all the photosynthesis in the world takes place. On the tree, we do have evidence of some air plants, some epiphytes, which they do call Spanish moss. It looks a little bit different from the Spanish moss we see on the eastern coast of the United States, but that is Spanish moss. We see lichens growing. The gray color is not the bark, that's a lichen. And around it, we've got some very pretty flowers. The yellow ones are Condia lucia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's what they're called. And they're mostly yellow around here because their pollinator is an endemic bee, and there's only the one, we've been told, and it really likes yellow. Of course, having said that, right underneath we do have the very hardy plant that seems to grow everywhere, and that is the Galapagos morning glory. And that is a white color with a pretty pinky inside. Just beautiful up here. And to add to this glorious view, all around us on the ground and in some of the trees, we have birds coming here to nest.
Oh my goodness, look! It's a white red-footed booby. They're two there and they're nesting. They're white, not brown like normal people. Normal boobies. Cool. Look, it's a brown one, a normal red-footed booby. And look, it looks like it's cooling itself off by vibrating its throat. It also has its feathers lift up like a waved albatross.
We are surrounded by these boobies. There's another red-footed one sitting on a sandalwood. One thing that's also interesting about them is the lichen causes them to have the white color, but this is a symbiotic relationship because the white reflects the sun. So it's a good thing for the tree as well as a good thing for the lichen to have a place on which to grow. The two colors of these red-footed boobies are amazing. It's not a different species or even a subspecies. It's just a morph of the color of their feathers. That one's the brown one, and we just saw a red one that's got white feathers. They are beautiful.
Both male and female frigatebirds will help take care of the nest. So here we have a male minor frigatebird in the tree on its nest right now.
Right now we're looking at a couple of minor frigatebirds, which is one species we see a lot of in the Galapagos Islands, but we really see a lot of birds flying around the Galapagos on the coast and around the sea. A lot of those birds belong to the order known as Pelecaniformes, and that includes the blue, red, and Nasca Boobies we see, the frigates, pelicans, cormorants, flamingos, and even the tropic bird. The thing these all have in common is that they feed mostly on fish, except for the flamingo. But the really neat thing is about how each of these birds obtains their food. The boobies, they will plunge dive, and they have special closed nostrils and serrated bills so that they can just come up from underneath the fish and just scoop it up and hold on tight with their serrated bills. The frigates are actually kleptoparasites, so you'll commonly see them following around birds like the boobies or the pelicans and chasing them and attacking them, hoping they'll drop their food so they can swoop in and steal it. In fact, they rarely ever even touch the water. they're just seen flying around in the air a lot. The pelicans also have a type of plunge dive, but theirs isn't as deep as the boobies. They'll just kind of fly right into the water. It doesn't look very graceful, but it's very precise. And they'll scoop up a large amount of water and hopefully a fish or two. And those fish can be up to a foot long, and then they'll just filter out that water and swallow the fish whole. The cormorant actually will dive as well, but it'll dive from the water because it can't fly. And it has extremely adapted feet that can be used for propulsion, so they can feed on those bottom dwellers in the ocean. The tropic bird is another plunge diver, and it'll plunge dive just below the surface and come right back up with its prey. While the flamingo is the only one that doesn't really plunge dive or anything like that in this family, it actually will filter feed. It will suck in water from underneath the surface of the lagoon habitat they live in, and they'll sieve out anything they don't want and just keep those microorganisms in, and that's actually where they get their color from. Jaime, our naturalist, spotted some feathered remains of what appears to be some minor frigate birds. They probably were actually the younger and immature young of the frigate birds, because the frigate birds are actually extremely adept flyers and can navigate the skies rather well. But like any bird, that's a learned skill, so the young are a little bit more susceptible to misflights. They didn't fly right into these rocks here and just die there. They probably would clip a wing on the cliff or something, or become injured in some other way, and then they would stumble upon the cliff and they would slowly starve because they just couldn't fly to capture their own food. Right now we're looking at a huge congregation of storm petrels. They come here to Genovesa to breed during the breeding season, and you can just see them by the thousands clearly. They're actually one of the three types of birds that we see that are part of the order of Pelecaniformes, which is just tube-nosed birds. They're called tube-nosed birds because they have a special gland between and or above their eyes that filters the salt out of the water, because they consume a lot of water when they feed, and that water is obviously salt water since they feed in the ocean. That salt concentrate will go from the glands, which is at the base of the bill, and those tube nostrils they have will carry it to the end of the bill where it will just drop off. So that's where they get their name. They spend most of their time at sea and only come to land for nesting, so that's what we're seeing right now with these storm petrels. But the same can be said for the shearwaters that you'll see in the Galapagos, as well as the waved albatross. They actually are noted for their unique sense of smell. They're probably the best smell of all the seabirds in the Galapagos, and they use that sense of smell to identify their young, as you can see is a valuable skill here when you have thousands of storm petrels all in the same place.
Okay, what we have here is a short-eared owl, and what it's doing is waiting in ambush for one of the birds flying around in the area to come try and find a nesting spot down there, and it will pounce on it like a petrel mostly. The owls mostly hunt during the day around sunrise and sunset. They have a higher population on this island and many of the other exterior islands because there are no hawks here to compete for food sources. Both the barn owl and the short-eared owl are found in more abundance on these islands. The owl is a unique bird in that it has front-facing eyes. These eyes allow it to judge distances better so that it can swoop down on its prey and know exactly how far away its prey is when it comes down. It also has differently shaped ears on the right side and the left side so that it can better hone in on the exact position of a noise. The owl's front-facing eyes make it so that it has poor peripheral vision, and to make up for this, their necks can turn in an amazing radius so that they can see in almost any direction.
Ay, la 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 bamba. One thing that we as humans typically do is ascribe our own characteristics to animals that have very little in common with us. It's called anthropomorphism. We tend to look at a bird, look at an iguana, and look at it in human terms rather than in its own terms, and try to understand the bird as a bird or an iguana as an iguana. We like to look at it as what is it that's human about it? We look at courtship rituals in terms of our own rather than as the bird might look at it. Feeding, caring for young. We get upset when we look at the Nazca Boobie and the first hatchling commits suicide with its sibling once it hatches, and we tend to get somewhat disturbed or upset. Because from a human standpoint, that would be wrong. That would be a sin. But perhaps not for a Nazca Boobie.
My name's Kevin, and one of the coolest things I've got to see out here in the Galapagos was just a few days ago when we saw the Galapagos hawk just swoop down, and it felt like it was near enough to attack me, but it was just amazing to really get that up-close personal view of a Galapagos hawk.
Hi, I'm Holt, and my wow moment here while we have been at the Galapagos is probably just seeing how fearless all the animals are, just how close they allow us to come to them without running away. It's just something that we don't have back in the States. Whether it's sitting next to a sea lion or walking up to a mockingbird, it's just really, really cool.
My name is Michael, and my wow moment here on the Galapagos Island has just been seeing how beautiful this whole area is, but also how delicate it is, how once introduced species can throw off the entire balance, or one strong current can rechange the entire face of the islands, and how God has delicately balanced everything so that we can see this wondrous beauty.
Hi, I'm Bee. My wow for these weeks, it's a hard one, but I have two. My first one was seeing the blue-footed boobies dive down into the water and then pop up like a buoy. And my second one was watching the marine iguana eat underwater. That was so cool.
My wow moment was watching the pelican feed in the water. Whereas a booby goes in like a bullet into the water, the pelican looks like a brick. It basically does a belly flop into the water, trying to catch the fish.
Wow, very sharp.
Which one is
The
the
one on
sharp
top.
beak?
The sharp beak, yeah, 1.5 inch.
Both of them or just
No,
one?
just one. The other one is the small round thing.
Okay, so the one on the right, the little one there.
most of just do it by themselves and then get on. They just hide the body if they can. And then have to do it.
Well, ladies, we've had the wonderful opportunity here in the Galapagos to see so many different examples of the Galapagos giant tortoise. Most of what we've seen was in Puerto Ayora in the tortoise reserve at the Charles Darwin Research Station, but we also saw some in Puerto Villamil in their tortoise reserve where they were breeding and raising tortoises. But the coolest thing about these tortoises is that we got to see so many examples of different species within the islands without actually having to go to all the places where they're found. Some of them live on kind of isolated volcanoes that we just couldn't visit in the time we had here in the Galapagos. But the neatest thing about the tortoises is not where they are, but what they eat and how they get that. It all has to do with their shell variations.
Oh yeah, there's the dome-back tortoise actually. That one lives on islands similar to Isabella and Santa Cruz. It is actually kind of shaped like this, and it's because its neck is more restricted and the more vegetation allows it to eat farther down. And they're kind of heavier than the saddlebacks.
I know about the saddlebacks. I know about them. They live on islands like Pinta Island, San Cristobal Island, Espanola Island, and Santiago Island. They have more like a saddle kind of shell-shaped thing. So they live on drier islands because the vegetation's so high up. So they lift their neck up and grab it, eat it, and also where their legs are higher up too, so their legs can go up too, so they can stand up and get it.
Yeah, that's true. And then we have the intermediates. Those are the final type, and they're not necessarily their own shell type. It's kind of just when there's a mixture between a saddleback and a domeback in some places, kind of like we saw at Sierra Negra, where we have a really flat tortoise back, because those are just kind of the results of sometimes interbreeding between different species, and that could have been a result of maybe whalers or pirates moving tortoises around when they would take them on their ships and things like that. Well, we've seen so many birds out here in the Galapagos. There's so many species, but one of the main ones we've seen is actually the boobies. We've seen 3 different kinds of boobies, and the cool thing about them is that they're all the same, but all different. For example, they all plunge dive basically the same way, where they'll fly in the air and just really stop flying and point straight down like an arrow and plunge dive into the water, go underneath the fish, and then come right up and grab it in its bill. And there's so many reasons they do this. For example, the fish can't look down, and they also can swoop under the fish and really grab it with its serrated bill. That's just one of those things that we see this all the same. But they also have differences, like we'll see in the blue-footed booby, right?
Right, yeah, the blue-footed booby has a really intricate mating process, and what it'll do is something called the love dance. And the love dance is where kind of the male blue-footed booby alternates feet and makes kind of like a whistling noise to the female. And the female will return right back and make a honking noise. And then the male will then give the female presents like twigs and different types of things to make nests with, but they actually don't use those to make nests. They make nests anywhere they want to on the ground. They can lay up to 2 to 3 eggs, and that's possible because they live in near shallower water, so they can get more food to feed the different eggs with, so they can raise more than one child.
Yeah, but the Nasca Boobies are a little bit different. They only lay 2 eggs, and only one of them ends up surviving when they hatch into a chick. What happens is, you see, the Nazca Boobie lives up on cliffs or rocky ledges where they can get a running start when they start flying, because they're the heaviest of all the boobies. They'll go out, and they go farther out to feed than the blue-footed boobies, and they'll bring back enough food for just one chick. So that other egg, before it hatches, or maybe after it hatches, will be pushed out of the nest by the older chick. And once this occurs, the older chick will get all the food because the parents will ignore the younger chick.
That's so sad.
It is sad. But the red-footed booby only lays 1 egg. 1 egg every 15 months. And they live in trees, unlike most seabirds. And it's also the smallest of all the boobies. They have a sort of mating dance, but it's mostly just head shaking and sort of sky pointing, which is flaring their wings out and looking to the sky. But it's not much, unlike the blue-footed booby. But they do dive, like all boobies, and they go farther out than even the Nazca Boobie. And so since they are so far out, they can only bring food for their one baby. So,
very interesting.
Well, I really enjoyed watching the owls we've seen at a couple of different islands. And it's very interesting to see how they'll live on all the islands. You'll find the owls, but you'll find very few wherever you find the Galapagos hawk. And you'll also find very few of the short-eared owl if the barn-eared owl is living on that island.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's actually kind of the same sort of diversity with the Galapagos sea lions between the fur seals. With the Galapagos sea lions, you can find them on a majority of the islands on the coast. And also, but the difference between them and the fur seals would be that the Galapagos sea lions are actually larger and their snout is typically longer.
Yeah, but the fur seals are only found on Floriana, Santiago, and most of the northern islands.
That's very neat. These are definitely very diverse islands between all of these different creatures.
Oh, yeah.
Very true.
Okay, well, we just had a great day on Genovesa Island, and according to our map, we were right here. Now, did y'all see those puntia cactuses today?
Yes. Oh, I know. Did you notice how small they were compared to like when we were at Santa Fe?
I know.
The reason for that is because the nutrients in Santa Fe is so much greater. Because did you notice all the rocks today at Genovesa? They just have such little soil that they can't grow very tall.
You know, there's another reason why they're so short on Genovesa. They don't have any natural predators. But on Santa Fe, they were really tall. Remember, they had like almost like trees.
Yeah.
They actually have a lot of land iguanas on that island, and they eat the cactus.
Oh, so they have to be taller to kind of keep out of reach.
Yes. And so on that island, the land iguanas actually eat the leaves when they fall off.
Okay.
Speaking of land iguanas, that reminds me of another type of iguana, the marine iguanas. Did y'all see that really, really small marine iguana on Genovesa today?
Oh, I know, especially after we saw the really big ones. I mean, the ones today were like this big, and the ones on Fernandina, which is right there, were like this big. It was unbelievable.
And they're also different from the ones that were on Espanola, remember? Those ones were reddish colored.
I know, and at Genovesa, we only saw like a few, whereas on Fernandina, we saw hundreds. It was amazing.
I've noticed on the Galapagos Islands that the finches, they have different beak sizes and head sizes. Is there anything that you can tell me about that?
Well, what you're seeing is an example of adaptive radiation. Now, within each island, we are seeing the finches adapt to what food sources there are available. And then they are radiating throughout that island depending on what the dominant food source is.
Okay, well, what about the beak sizes? Does that depend on, the food they eat?
Yeah, it actually does. You see, there's two different genes that determine the size and shape of the beak. One that has to do with how long the beak is and one that has to do with how wide the beak is. So based on the food source, that's going to change with what species we see on each island. The islands where there's more seeds available, we're going to see more species like the ground finches, which have, those thick and strong crushing beaks. There's also nectar eaters, which are like the ground, or with the cactus finches, which you find on islands with lots of puntia cactus. We also have the insect and fruit eaters. Those are like the tree finches we see. And also the most surprising of all is the tool-using birds, like the woodpecker finch and the sharp-beaked ground finch, which will actually use like sticks or cactus spines to probe in the dead wood and pull insects out for them to eat.
So we were on Genovesa Island today, and I noticed tons of birds flying around. Some of them were big and black with a wide wingspan and a little bit of red on their neck. What were those?
Well, what you were seeing on Genovesa was the frigatebird. Now, the frigatebird is known as the pirate of the sky because it likes to steal the food from the red-footed boobies or the blue-footed boobies and eat it for themselves. They don't actually hunt for themselves. They pirate in a way from other birds. Now, we know that there are two different kinds of frigatebirds because of the coloration on their back. Some have a tint of green on their feathers that's very faint, but I'm not so sure how you figure those out.
You see, you were right about the color. The minor or great frigatebird has a hint of green on the back of the feathers, but if there's a hint of purple or if it's just really black, you probably are seeing a magnificent frigatebird. They're both common in the Galapagos, but the difference we see when we go from island to island is that the farther away the islands are from the central area of Santa Cruz and things like that, the more likely we're going to see the minor or great frigatebird. That's because those are largely more pelagic bird species that's going to fly farther away from where they first started.